Hi there, and welcome back to the Boileau Family Law Group YouTube channel. I'm Trevor, and this is Marla Miller. She is one of the founders of Boileau Family Law Group and is the one who's going to be answering a bunch of questions for you today on married versus unmarried in regards to property rights. Again, the title of this video is Family Lawyers Edmonton, Married versus Unmarried in regards to property rights. I have a quick statistic for you from StatsCan. In 2011, about 4/5 or 80% of individuals in couples were married spouses, and the remaining 1/5 were common law partners. 3 decades earlier, in 1981, 93.7% of people in couples were married spouses, while 6.3% were common law partners. That's quite a big difference in just 30 years between people who are married and just common law. So maybe you have a little bit of insight into married versus unmarried, a little bit about our topic today. What can you share with us?
I think that people have gone away from marriage and are living together more commonly because the social stigma about living together has definitely changed in the last 30 years. Lots of people, ironically, decide that they want to live together rather than get married because they don't want to have any legal implications or complications. And we'll talk about that. You'll see that that is changing.
Yeah, it's huge. They want to get away from the legal implications and so forth, but there's more that come along. So what are the big differences between married and unmarried in regards to property rights in Alberta?
As we speak today, there's a big difference, but there's going to be a change to legislation. But presently, if you are married, there is a law on the books, there's legislation that deals with how you deal with property on relationship breakdown. It's called the Matrimonial Property Act, and it clearly specifies what property is shareable and what property may not be shareable. If you are living common law, you don't fall under that legislation. And so at present, if you want to make a claim for the property of your common law spouse, you have to look at what the case law has said about that. And there are specific steps that you have to go through to be able to show that there's entitlement to property. And then under the married person's legislation, under the Matrimonial Property Act, the basic presumption is that it's a 50-50 split. If you can show entitlement as common law, it's not necessarily even 50-50.
Oh, okay. So can you speak about the changes that are going to be upcoming on this?
So it's anticipated that in January of 2020, the Matrimonial Property Act will be changed so that it will impact common law partners so that they will be treated exactly the same as married couples. So you can see that people that became common law because they didn't want to have their property intermingled are now going to have to take steps to protect themselves from that kind of a claim.
I see. Next question that I have for you, Marla, is how did the Family Law Act change things for married and unmarrieds in Alberta?
That legislation was changed about 15 years ago, and that legislation gave, amongst other things, it gave common law spouses the right to claim for spousal support, which was something that wasn't found in the legislation before that time.
Okay, now what is the Adult Interdependent Relationships Act, and how does that affect couples?
The Adult Interdependent Relationships Act defined common law couples, and they're now called Adult Interdependent Partners, or AIPs. So in the biz, we call them APEs. So if you're living together, you may be an APE. And what that did is that legislation was enacted because the government at that time was not willing to acknowledge common law as the same as married. So this was their sort of compromise legislation. And basically it says that if you qualify as an adult interdependent partner or an APE, then you may be entitled to certain things. And it defined what it is to be an APE. So you have to have lived in a relationship of interdependence for more than 3 years, or you have to have lived in a relationship of some permanence if you have a child, or you could become an APE, an adult interdependent partner, before the 3 years if you entered into the formal agreement as contemplated by the legislation.
Okay. Now, besides personal property, what are some other things that couples should consider before cohabitation?
Well, there are so many things that you should consider. You should consider how you are going to manage your finances and acquire property while you're together. You should consider if you've got children from previous relationships, what will be the boundaries that you'll set around the children? How will you use your money for the purposes of children? You might want to talk about if you're closer to the other end where you're close to retirement and you're lucky enough to have a pension, what kind of choices might you make around your election of pensions? Because if you're together and you choose your common law spouse or your married spouse for that matter as your pension partners so that your pension is payable for your life, and if you die it's payable to your spouse, and then you later break up, you can't change that. Right. So there's so many different things that you might want to talk about, and people want to think about, okay, how do we deal with things over together? How do we deal with things if we separate? But also, what if one of you predeceases the other? What are the agreements that you want to make around how your estate will be dealt with? Yeah,
there's a lot of different factors to consider when you're thinking about connecting with another human being. It seems pretty complicated, but I guess this brings me to my next question. What's a cohabitation agreement?
A cohabitation agreement is a formal agreement where the parties will decide all those things that we talked about, usually all those things that we just talked about, and they'll codify in the agreement what happens if they break up, what happens if one of them dies. Sometimes people will deal with how do they want to deal with the money during the time that they're together. So it can be all-encompassing, or sometimes people just say, you know what, we don't want to get into that, but we want to have an agreement that just says, clearly this is mine and this is the value that we agreed on, because a lot of times a lot of litigation is around what were things worth 20 years ago when you guys got together.
Yeah. Marla, can you tell me who should consider a cohabitation agreement?
Anybody that's going to live in a common law relationship should consider a cohabitation agreement. It's especially important if you have assets that you're bringing into the relationship from previously, or if you have children that you may want to protect and provide for.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that people need to be thinking about in regards to these things. And I think everyone should definitely consider having some kind of agreement in place. And I don't think a lot of people do, because they don't understand the legislation, they don't understand rights, responsibilities, and what can happen.
More so than that, it's very hard to have a conversation with someone to say, hey, I love you, I want to be with you, but I want to protect myself in case this doesn't work out. And the statistics are very alarming about the chances of it working out. So it's challenging to have the conversation in a respectful and loving manner.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. So what is the process like for a cohabitation agreement?
There's lots of different ways to enter into a cohabitation agreement. One of the more evolved ways to do it is to do it either through mediation, where the parties to the relationship will come and meet with a neutral third party who will walk them through the negotiation, so that it's not one side drafting an agreement that the other side doesn't want to sign. Sure. Or another way of doing it is through a collaboration, where each party is represented by their own lawyers and having conversations to decide what both parties want in an agreement. That's I say it's more evolved, because previously what would happen is one person would go to their lawyer and the lawyer would draft something that was just very scary, because they wanted to make sure nothing was ever shared under any circumstances. Very one-sided, and then the agreements wouldn't get signed. So if you can do it in a way where both parties are identifying their needs and interests and are trying to come to an agreement, and then the agreement is drafted to reflect the understanding that the parties come to first, it's just a way better and quicker way to do things.
Yeah, and that's something that you specialize in, is mediation part of it, right?
Yes, and I've done some of the cohabitation agreements, or prenuptial for that matter, in that manner, and it's just way more efficient, and it challenges the parties to have the hard conversations. But really, if you are living with someone and you say, I want to have an agreement with you, it can be taken to be a very loving thing, because you're saying, I want to be clear with you about what's going to happen under all these different circumstances.
Yeah, it can avoid those messy things that could come up later, and makes it very clear, cut and dry. That's fantastic. Now, how long does it typically take to create a cohabitation agreement?
Well, it really depends on how clear the parties are and what they want. And it can be streamlined based on the experience of the lawyer. If the lawyers know what to talk to the clients about and what things they should consider, and have some examples or that they can share with the clients about, you know, other clients have done it this way, or you might want to consider that way. Because if you just ask people, lots of people will say, well, I want a cohabitation agreement, or I want a prenuptial agreement. And then you say, what do you want? And they say, well, I don't know. I just think it's a good idea. So the lawyer's expertise can really help people to streamline the process.
Excellent. And that's where I feel that Miller Boileau has an advantage over a lot of different groups in Edmonton, because you have over 26 years of experience as a Miller Boileau Family Law Group, and yourself, you've got more than that, and you can draw upon a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise from over the years of practice that can help anybody who is looking for a cohabitation agreement, a prenuptial, or any other type of family law matter. So how do people get started with you, Marla?
Just give our office a call. When you call our office, you will speak with somebody. You're not going to get the voice answering system, and you will speak with one of us right away, or you'll speak with one of our assistants, and we'll schedule you for an appointment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And if you guys are in need of cohabitation agreement, or if you just have some questions, definitely get in touch with Miller Boileau Family Law Group, and they'll be glad to set you up with a initial consultation so they can answer any questions that you might have and make you feel more at ease with the process. We'll see you guys next time.